Bend Around the Wind by Skylia. Chapter 80. Alfheim, Day 2. Loki didn't sleep well. He lost count on how many times he woke up from images of shouts, smoke, and blood. He eventually gave up on sleeping altogether. Normally, when he woke from an unpleasant dream, reality welcomed him in the form of Stark's warm body next to his. Now there was only his enormous empty room and the two-big bed. It was so ridiculous to feel Stark's absence so strongly. He was just not used to it, that's what he told himself. He did not fret about losing some sleep, and at least he could watch the sunrise over Wolves Woods and the hills beyond it. That was a sight he dearly missed. His mood was still not the most pleasant after a night like that, and it didn't take long for others to notice. When they all sat down for breakfast, it was Thor who brought it up first.
"Something the matter, Loki?"
he asked. The question was genuine, and so was the concern in his voice. "I did not sleep well," Loki said. Drongo immediately understood and asked no questions. He knew how often Loki still woke from nightmares and how it made him a little more irritable than usual. Thor, Frey, and Frigga, on the other hand, looked surprised. It took Loki a moment to realize why. Loki answered with something other than some variation of fine. He never used to do that in things like this. He was probably just too used to Stark and Hatchet asking prodding questions. There was no use trying to keep things from them. Why Ragnarok must be upon them. The trickster of Asgard was overly used to being honest.
"If there was something bothering you,"
Thor started, but Loki interrupted him. That was just enough concern for one morning. "I just haven't slept on my own in years, so I was restless." Oh? That one sound from his mother had a plethora of questions in it. "Yours, you say?" Freya said. "Do tell us more." That was no hardship at all. "Thor already knows him," he said. "His name is Tony Stark, and he is of Midgard." Frigga turned to look at Thor questioningly. "Isn't he that
Iron Man?"
Thor said. It was the same proud tone he used when he introduced his posse.
"I told you about him. He is one of Midgard's most beloved heroes."
"Not what I would have started with," Loki commented. It made Drongo chuckle.
"What would you have started with then?"
Thor asked. "That he is one of the most intelligent men on Midgard," Loki said. "A truly ingenious inventor who has impressed me many times with his brilliant creations."
"And while that is all true, the people of Midgard seem to celebrate him more for his heroic deeds,"
Thor said. He was smiling, though not truly arguing. "The masses, perhaps," Loki said. "But the greater minds of Midgard vow him for his intellect." "At least we can agree that he must be quite exceptional," Frey said, "if both of you are singing his praises." "There is much to praise, after all," Loki said.
"He is also one of the wealthiest men of the realm,"
Thor added.
"Whenever I'm back on Midgard, I enjoy his hospitality, and he's a good friend." "I can attest to as well,"
Drongo added. "He was taken along with you, was he not?" Frigga asked. "Yes, but I don't think that is appropriate breakfast conversation," Loki said. He would rather not think of those months while eating. "I agree," Frey nodded. "I would much rather hear more about your young beau," he said with a pleasant smile, "because I do not believe you were ever impressed this much by someone before." Talking about Stark chased away his unpleasant mood, and who didn't like to brag proudly? Just a little. Unsurprisingly, his uncle wanted to know more about Thanos and the other. He did not care about the details. He didn't ask how Loki ended up in their clutches the first time, or how they punished him the second time. Loki did not like to talk about that, so it was a relief to be able to skip those events. He did not have to prove to Frey that he was punished enough, or justify why he was working against those who were his allies not that long ago. He only cared about the present and the future. Loki could appreciate that. Besides, Loki really didn't want to have to watch Frigga's face when he talked about such things. Having to tell Thor was enough. Frey listened to him carefully, seemingly deep in thought. Only when Loki was done did he start talking about what was needed to be done to protect the 9 realms from the Mad Titan.
"It is Midgard that needs to be protected,"
Thor said.
"He won't get into Asgard, so he won't have either the Tesseract or the Infinity Gauntlet to aid him."
"It might have some of the soul gems," Frey warned. "Besides, they took Loki from Asgard quite easily."
Loki was not kept in the vault.
Thor pointed it out.
What happened then will not happen again. We learned from our mistake.
I would certainly hope so, Frey said. Regardless, even protected Midgard might not be such an easy feat if the Mad Titan launches a full attack on the realm. I doubt the humans could defend themselves on their own.
I will fight with them as well,
Thor said. Do not underestimate him, Thor, Loki said. Why do you think Bor needed to make an alliance with all the realms to defeat him? Midgard may not be defenseless, but their fate is sealed, without considerable help.
Asgard will help, Thor said. I'll lead our warriors myself if I have to.
We do not doubt your loyalty to Midgard, Thor, Frey said. You just need to realize that Asgard is not as powerful on its own as you might believe.
We have allies to call upon,
Thor said. What allies? The people the Aesir waged the war upon? Or the ones Odin forced to bow down? How willingly will they join Asgard in a war after all that? Thor fell silent, thinking before speaking again. It was a welcome change from the way he used to be.
You claim the Vanir and the Lofsafar wouldn't join forces with Asgard?
He asked then. Not at all, Frey said. The question is how willing their help would be. You cannot force peace or friendship, no matter what one might think. Spilt blood is not so easily forgiven or forgotten. The peace he created is but an illusion. Did you know some of the Vanir still call him Odin the Terrible, the werewolf, ruler of treachery? Those were not honorable titles. His mother went very still as Frey talked, while Thor was getting irritated.
The war was thousands of years ago,
Thor said. Ah, wrong answer. Oh, and time is all it takes, isn't it? Frey asked. His tone was more brisk. He was getting a little angry. It's been before your time, so it does not matter.
That is not what I meant,
Thor said. You do not even know what you meant, Frey said in a stern tone. You have never been in true war. You have not watched your home get drenched in the blood of your kin. You have not been torn away from your birthland. You have not been forced to your knees by the one who did it all. You know nothing. So do not tell me that it's all well, because it's been a long time ago. Frey, Frigga said quietly. It was a warning. No! Frey turned to look at her. It's time the boy learns to look outside of his golden box. It's supposed to be king soon. Such idealistic naivete has no place in the head wearing the crown.
I am not naive,
Thor said.
I just believe that old wounds as such had time to heal. That we can all move on from them. Asgard and Vanaheim have been in peace for so long.
Peace! Frey scoffed. If it would be true peace, I would be sitting on my throne. I would be leading my people towards something better. Instead, there is nothing but stagnation under the rule of Asgard. Vanaheim has no control over its own fate. How is that peace? Tell me.
Your
father is a warmonger, Frey said. The Aesir admire him for he has brought them many glorious victories. The rest of the realms curse his name for all the blood he spilled.
You should not talk about him like that,
Thor said relatively quietly. You are not a child, Frey snapped. Not anymore. I won't spare you from reality. You will soon sit on the throne of Asgard, and if you haven't learned by now that Odin is not such a beloved leader in all realms, then prepare for a harsh awakening. When you take on the throne, you take on all of its history, the good and the bad, the glorious and the ugly. That throne you will sit on was built by war and death. The other realms won't forget that. You should not forget it either. Frey, Frigga warned, now sternly. She had a deep frown on her face. Frey turned to look at her, then sighed. Thor stood very still, his jaw tight, his fists clenched. Forgive me, Frey said then. You are not the cause of my ire. You should not have to be the one to suffer my words.
And yet lately it happens more and more,
Thor said, shoulders slumping a little. You will be a great king, Frey said. Thor looked at him again at that. I do not doubt that. But you are young still and have much to learn, especially about the things most would rather not think of. They were all silent for a bit. Frigga was still scowling at her brother, but he did not seem to be bothered by it.
You intend to take back the Vanir throne,
Thor said then.
That is why you're building an alliance with the Jotnar.
Perceptive, Frey said, agreeing.
Why?
Thor asked. Because it is my right, Frey said.
And after you do, then what?
Thor asked.
When you have the Vanir and the alliance of the Jotnar, even the help of the elves, what will you do then?
What do you think I will do?
Will you turn against Asgard?
Thor asked, stern now.
Take revenge? What?
Frey looked at him for a long moment, then smiled enigmatically. Not if you sit on the throne. Oh, Loki would never stop to be amazed by how his uncle handled certain matters.
I will,
Thor said.
eventually.
Certainly. I just mean that Odin better not be reluctant for too long to hand over the crown to you.
But
Odin waged war on us. We cannot make true peace with him. Frey said. Still, what that wasn't done. The Vanner would never agree, either with the Otnar, but you're my nephew. It's much easier to get along with family, don't you think? Your marriage would tie the three thrones together, the three realms, Loki said. And you would still have the loyalty of the Jofsvafar. Because I treated them right all these years, Frey said easily. And because I fully intend to forfeit the throne of Alfheim once I return to Vanaheim. You see, Thor, this is how you create long and lasting peace. Not with war and fear, not with stealing children from your defeated foe. Consider this my lesson in kingship to you. That is quite enough from your lessons for today, Frigga said, standing up. Thor will be a good king even without your lecturing. Oh, quite true, Frigga said. You are his mother after all. Save your flattery for your betrothed, Frigga said, and your scheming for another day. My sons have enough to deal with as it is. Just start arranging the meeting with your Lady Good to help Loki. Everything else can wait. Only a fool would argue with you, dearest, Frey said, and gave her a tiny bow and a smile. Duty calls then, I'm afraid. I'll see you at supper. Without anything further, he left. Do not let Frey's words get to you, Thor, Frigga said as soon as he was gone. Not all Vanir are still angry. A lot of wounds healed over the years, just as you said.
But not all,
Thor said. Some wounds were not allowed to heal, Frigga said sadly. But we all believe in you. We all know what a great king you will be. Do not forget that. Thor remained quiet for a moment, then nodded.
I need some fresh air to clear my head,
he said and glanced at Loki. Go, by all means. You do not need to be around me every second of the day. I have things to discuss with Mother anyway.
Very well,
Thor said and left as well.
I'll leave you to your discussion,
Drongo said, standing up. He was such a silent presence in the room, observing instead of joining in on the conversation. Loki was tempted to ask him what he thought of everything so far, but he would have the chance to do that later. Feel free to explore the palace, Loki told him. Alfheim has much to offer after all.
Undoubtedly,
Drongo said. Probably even the old Hadnas would be willing to converse with you, Loki added. You have the sort of personality he likes.
Oh? How so? Am I wise and intelligent?
You're quiet, Loki smirked.
He would adore me then,
Drongo countered with a wide smile. Loki laughed at the words. Drongo bowed to Frigga then and left them alone. What is it? Loki asked as he caught his mother staring at him with a peculiar look on her face. I've never seen you in love before, she said with a smile. All these years, not once, no childless infatuations either. Thor was mooning over a different maiden every fortnight when he was a young man, but not you. I'm not one for shallow emotions, Loki said. No, you have always felt things very deeply, Frigga agreed. Loki really had nothing to say to that. And now a mortal man, she continued. Not what I would have expected. Loki frowned a little. Oh, do not look at me like that, she said. I just mean that I would have sooner expected you to find love here, among the Jofsvafar, maybe. For a long time I even believed that your failing friend had your heart. Loki laughed out a small laugh at that. Many believed that, he said, because it was true after all. He spent as much time as possible with Hatchet whenever he visited Alfheim. It was inevitable that tongues started waggling about it. He's family to me, he said then, because it needed to be said. A dear friend, a mentor, a guardian. I will not hear ill about him. I wasn't about to, Frigga reassured him. Oh, Thor said you have not approved, Loki told her. Loki, you should see the reason for our concerns. The Fae could never be considered a good influence on a young man. They're not kind people. Loki scoffed. Like the Aesir are any better. I do not wish to argue with you, Frigga said then. You'd rather I remain silent again? Keep my words to myself until they rot me from the inside? No, Loki, I may be not as angry at you as I am at Odin, but that does not mean I am not angry at all, he said and turned around to look outside the window. Frigga stood up and walked up to him. Loki continued before she could speak. It may have been Odin's design, but you went along with it. And do not tell me it is because he was the king and his word was law, because you are not some mindless servant of his. I told you I wanted to tell you the truth. It's not about that! Loki snapped, then grabbed hold of his temper and continued slightly quieter. It's not just about the lies of my heritage. It's about raising me to despise myself. That is untrue. You grew up as our son, just like Thor, she said. I grew up to tales about the monstrous frost giants, the horrible beasts that need to be slain for their evil nature. What did you think was going to happen once I learned the truth after all that? Frigga's eyes were widened as she looked at him, sharp pain in their blue depths. We didn't want you, she started again, but Loki interrupted. Yes, you didn't want me to feel different, Loki said, backing away from the window and her as his temper rose again. That's what you don't understand. Being different shouldn't be wrong. That made her close her mouth right away. Loki continued. You didn't need to protect me from it. You only should have taught me that it was all right to be unlike others, because I was never going to be the same. I was always going to be different, whether you lied to me or not. You should have known that. You should have made sure I understood that. He took a large breath, steadying his voice. It's not about the lies, he said. It's about letting me believe that I was fundamentally wrong, just by being who I am. It's about making me compare myself to Thor every single day of my life. Loki, I have loved you both the same, she said hurriedly. I never wanted you to compare yourself to him like that. I have praised your magic just as I praised his prowess in battle. Both your father and I have loved you equally. You have to believe that. Loki shook his head. That's not true, he said. It's never been true. Yes, it is, Frigga said, more sternly now. Do you not think you know my heart better than I do? You are both my sons. You are both loved by me, no matter what. You really want me to believe that you're capable of that? Love the son of someone else, a Jotun, just as much as you love your own? He asked. He tried to rein in his anger again, but it was harder now. Love the child of another the way you love your own flesh and blood, he continued, demanding to know. You can really say that we are the same. Some infant Odin brought home from the land of your enemies, and the child you have given life to. You really want me to believe that you're true son? He's not, Frigga shouted. Then her eyes immediately widened and she plastered her hand over her mouth. Loki stood frozen, staring at her, all his words gone, like they were sucked out of him, just like the air from his lungs. Frigga closed her eyes, shook her head, and turned away. She sat down on the wide windowsill. What did you say? Loki asked. Frigga finally lowered her hand from her mouth. What do you mean? When the war against the Jotnar started, she said quietly, the armies remained on Midgard for many years. Odin returned to Asgard from time to time, never for long. Then one day when he returned, he had a child with him, a little boy. He said he was his son, his heir, an Odin son, and that he was to be raised as such. I understood, in a way, she continued, even if it angered me. There was war, there was no guarantee that he would not fall in battle, and I had yet to be blessed with child. He had no heir. What was to happen to his throne, to Asgard, if he died without one? He needed an heir, and I did not give him one. And the child, she said, remembering. I could never be angry at an innocent child who had no control of any of that. He was the son of my husband, the man I loved. So I loved him as if he were my very own. She sighed and looked out of the window. Loki was still too shocked to talk again. He just stood silently and listened. Then the war came to an end. Heimdall was the one to announce that we were victorious and that our warriors were returning. And Odin, once again, showed up with a child. Loki felt his heart speeding up because this was the first time Frigga spoke about the day he was taken to Asgard. I was so angry. Angrier than the first time, she said. The need for an heir in the time of war I could understand. But his second son, when it was finally peace? But then he told me who you really were, and that chased all my anger away. He told me he found you in a temple, that he recognized your markings and knew you were Laufey's son. And I thought of Frey, she said. She finally turned to look at Loki again, and there were glistening tears in her eyes. I thought about how he was never going to forgive Odin, for Asgard had not been kind to him. And right there, I swore to myself that I would love you as much as a mother can love. She blinked away some of the tears. I have no reason to love either of you more than the other. You are my sons. I have held you in my arms when you were small, sat on your bedsides as you fell asleep. Of course. As her words broke off, Loki hurried across the room and knelt down on the floor in front of her, let her pull him into an embrace, let her pull his head down on her shoulder. Do not doubt my love, she said, stroking a hand through his hair. But I ask you to forgive my mistakes. He believed he could do that, so he nodded. Twice I lost you, she said then. I cannot bear the thought of losing you again. Those words ached, made his chest feel too tight. You should tell him, Loki said after a long moment. He should hear it from you. It'll hurt more if he finds out differently, believe me. And he will find out one way or another, maybe not for years, but he will eventually. Thor found him late that night when the moon was already high. Loki only had to take one look at his face to know. She told you, he said. Thor nodded and sat down beside him. They were silent for long moments, just listening to the sounds of the night.
She does not know who she is,
Thor said after a long while. He fell silent and sighed, rubbed at his brows of frustration.
All I know is that she was of Midgard, but not a mortal.
That it could explain why you feel so strongly connected to the realm?
I don't understand the need for so many lies,
Thor said. I don't think the truth would have changed anything for you, Loki said. You're still Odin's son.
You mean his bastard,
Thor said grimly. He gave you his name, so you are not, Loki said reasonably.
I am still the son of a woman that is not his wife.
I can't argue with that, Loki agreed.
I keep wondering,
Thor said then,
whether she simply gave me to him or if he has taken me away from her.
You have to ask him that, Loki said. Thor scoffed.
I doubt he would answer honestly. He said you were abandoned, and yet there is no proof it was truly so. Whatever he says, I shall take it with a grain of salt.
You will confront him about this, then?
Oh, I will, Thor said. I have a lot to say to him, and not just about this.
If she was not immortal, she may be alive still. On Midgard or somewhere else, Loki said.
I was thinking the same.
Will you search? Loki asked.
Will you?
Thor asked in return. Mine is probably dead, Loki said. There was war, after all. The Aesir might have slain her. She was nowhere when Odin found him in that temple. I'll see what the Lady Gerd has to say.
I do not know either, Thor said. If she's alive, then I would probably like to meet her, but I already have a mother. We were not her children. She could have been cold, she could have been distant. She did not need to care, yet she did. There will be no other mother for me than her.
Aye, Loki agreed quietly. That was the gist of it. Frigga raised them, blood or no blood. She was their mother. This Midgardian woman, she may have had other children. Maybe you have brothers and sisters, Loki said then.
I already have a brother,
Thor said immediately. Loki resisted the urge to roll his eyes. You know what I mean.
No, I don't,
Thor said, looking at him.
Even if they exist, you're my brother. They're just my bloodkin. Or are you to say that if Laufey had other sons, you would call them brothers?
Loki He thought about it for a moment. Probably not, he said in the end. When he used that word, it always meant Thor, no one else. So you will return to Asgard then? Loki asked after some silence.
Just for a little while.
Thor nodded.
Then back to Midgard.
They fell silent again, but it was comfortable. It was still strange, but Loki believed he could get used to it. Though Thor was willing to build their bridges again, already did much to prove how very willing he was. He would do more still if Loki asked. Loki ought to do something in return. Loki should prove his willingness as well. It couldn't be Thor alone. When you return to Midgard, he started in a light and quiet tone that was not very usual for him. Your Lady Jane. I would meet her, if you think it would be fine. Thor turned to look at him, but his face was not like Loki would have expected. He looked stricken, deeply sad. What? Loki had to ask. Thor sighed. It truly seemed like there was too much weight on his shoulders. That was not what Loki intended with his offer.
A while back I had to take her to Asgard,
Thor said.
For her own safety, and...
He trailed off, but he did not need to say more. Loki understood right away. Odin put her to trial? He asked, a little disbelieving. Thor nodded. And she failed. It was the obvious conclusion.
She does not remember me now,
Thor said. His tone was flat and defeated. Loki hated it.
She's well enough, living her life.
He sighed again before he continued.
So, you see, I've been angry at him for quite some time. And now this?
He shook his head slowly, like he was deeply disappointed. A mortal who enters Asgard must prove their worth. It was an old tradition. It rarely ever happened, so it was not an actual law. Odin didn't need to follow it. He could have ignored it. He could have just said that she was worthy, for Thor has found her to be so. He must have not approved of her. That was all Loki could think of. His brother was smart enough to realize as much himself.
Maybe it was not meant to be, Thor said. We were from two different worlds. Maybe we were separated for a reason.
I'm going to say what my dearest Stark usually says about such things, Loki said. Bullshit! Thor huffed a little, lips curling slightly.
Yes, you're right, he said. It's not just about that. She's a scientist, much like Stark and Bruce. Whenever I tried picturing her in Asgard fulfilling the duties of a queen.
You couldn't see it? Loki asked.
No,
Thor admitted.
I could never ask her to give up what she was so passionate about, and I couldn't forfeit the throne.
All the more reason why he shouldn't have done that, Loki said. You either would have found a way, or you would have said goodbye to one another. But the choice should have been yours. You did not have the right... I don't know what I would do if... He did not say it out loud, because even the thought was turning his stomach. If Stark forgot all about him, if he did not remember any of the years they spent together, Loki would surely go mad. Thor smiled, a little sadly.
We should spar on the morrow, he said suddenly. Or go hunting, like we used to.
Loki stared at him for a moment. It was tempting, but he shook his head. I must go to the Fae tomorrow, and then back to Midgard.
Surely there is no haste, Thor said. We could use some time away from everything.
Loki honestly thought about it, but then shook his head again. Both Stark and Hatchet threatened to come after me if I'm not home in 3 days' time, he said. He even smiled at the end of it. Another time.
I could go to the Fae with you,
Thor offered then. I don't think that is a good idea. Loki laughed.
Why not? You cannot think that I'm still so poor with diplomacy. I will be king soon. I ought to know how to visit others without offending everyone.
How about you practice those fine diplomatic skills of yours on people who are not likely to eat you if you offend them? Loki asked. Thor laughed, the dark mood lifting from his shoulders a little.
Oh, fine. Have it your way, Thor said, but only because I indeed have much to learn about the Fae before I attempt a visit like that.
So wise now, brother, Loki said. I'm impressed. Thor smiled and draped an arm around his shoulder, pulling him closer. It didn't feel forced or uncomfortable, and that lightened Loki's heart.
One day you will say that and truly mean it,
Thor promised, looking into his eyes. I already do, Loki thought, but he did not say it out loud. He just smiled.